let's talk maybe about your project you got going. You sent me a copy of it.
Yeah, it's just a working draft to put a few days work in, but basically I could just set it up and see what your response to it was. But I'd been bothered for a long time by, the Biden's such a good guy. Oh, he's such a great, family man and dad. And he's so compassionate and empathetic. That bothered me during the pandemic. It bothered me in any number of cases. It bothered me when millions of people off Medicaid were taken off. It, of course, all throughout Gaza, the idea that he's super compassionate and just a good guy, right? Really rubbed me the wrong way. And I started to think about these characterizations, not just of him, but of other politicians and other presidents, and the focus, say, on Trump and his kind of narcissism or infidelity, or Clinton and his infidelity, the virtues and vices of politicians, especially presidents, in their kind of private or personal character, right? Often relating to like what kind of friend this person is, what kind of spouse, what kind of parent, things that take place classically in the oikos, right? The household, the private sphere, not the public sphere. And I started thinking about how much of a distraction that can be, intentionally or not, from the use of power and the public, the public character, right, of people like Biden and others who wield such power. Whether it's compassionate conservatism in George W. Bush, and boy, he's hugging Michelle Obama and he's drawing these adorable paintings after his presidency. I just got really kind of focused on why people and our democratic judgment is so prone to either cheer for or against people who use power, not for how they use the power, but for these characteristics that relate to their non-public roles, right? Like friend, parent, spouse, and so forth. Anyway, so I wrote about that. What'd you think of my initial draft here?
I thought it was good. It's a lot of stuff, we've talked about on the podcast before, but I think that distinction is useful in how people get so confused, as you say, in terms of like sort of banality of evil, almost.
That's right. Absolutely. Yes.
The Ezra Klein, he has like a meeting with Biden, and he's talked to him before and is like, wow, he seems like a swell dude. And so how could he be freezing the assets of the Taliban, or later on,
right.
Enabling to, at the very least, a genocide in Gaza. And it's like you're sort of confusing apples and oranges here. It's like that there are different kinds of virtue and they involve different kinds of action. And public virtue is not the same thing as private virtue. And you bring up the example of Lyndon Johnson, who was also involved in his own war, but domestically, was incredibly successful president, got a lot of great shit through. Civil Rights Act, Voting Rights Act, Medicare, Medicaid, boost to Social Security, and virtue in terms of doing like acts of public good for the citizenry was exceptionally successful. And yet in his private life was a real bastard.
And in contrast to Jimmy Carter, who just passed and who everyone, I think, acknowledges as one of the, more in his private life, good, simple, humble man, good Christian, all these virtues, humanitarian, and all these things. But obviously, and this is where I think democratic political judgment could see through the difference between LBJ and Carter. And that's a place where I wrote that actually I think most people understood that even though Carter was the better person, maybe LBJ was obviously the better, more effective president. But that contrast is helpful, though, to see where it's not applied and where people get confused, right?
Yeah. And I guess it raises a kind of a thorny question, because to what extent should we view private virtues as being sort of indicative of whether someone is going to be able to perform public virtues well? Right. So like LBJ was an incredibly manipulative person. He was famous for giving these senators like the treatment, I think it's called. It was just like buttonholing them in the hallway somewhere and just badgering them for like minutes and minutes, to get, one extra vote. And it was just like an overwhelming sort of performance. He's also very much a backslapping wheeler dealer type of guy. And I think that probably is not unrelated to his own sort of neurotic personality and his need for sort of attention and gratification. So there's maybe certain types of private vices that could be useful. You know, FDR was fairly similar. He was unfaithful to his wife for like most of his life, even though she knew about that at a very early stage, and was a slippery bastard and you know, interpersonally, but by the same token was incredibly effective as a politician.
That's the end of the preview, folks. As usual, we like to mention that this podcast is sponsored by the American Prospect magazine. So if you want to listen to the whole thing, you can subscribe at $5 a month. If you want that plus a free subscription to the website, plus the opportunity for a steeply discounted print subscription, you can do that if you so wish at $10 a month. And otherwise, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.